Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're really excited to launch this series, and we appreciate you investing time with us today. I am here with Heather Black, CEO of Supermoms. I'm Shellen Briand, and also on the Supermoms team is a success coach. And we are 1 week away from or since the book launch of Heather's new book of becoming a super Salesforce consultant. Yes, thank you, which was so
You
exciting.
haven't seen it yet?
I just so beautiful. It's like every time we look at LinkedIn, it is there, and it was really a passion project around consulting and a guide, an A to Z guide. And this series is we're going to tackle one chapter a week and get through the A to Z. And this week, very excited to kick off with a discussion around Agile project management. So Heather, welcome. This will be such a fun series. And I'd love for you to just share a little bit about how things went with the book launch. It's been fun to see the pictures all over LinkedIn, but maybe just give everyone an update because I know our last session, it was the day of the launch.
No, I know. No, it was a fantastic week. And I think it's just so amazing, like the global ohana of Salesforce and how we've had sales all over the world. So we hit the number one in 8 different categories across 4 different countries. And then we were in the top 10. I think we got to number 4 in India. But to have people buy it in Canada, USA, Australia, UK, and I think just reaching out to people because we at Supermoms, we have a global community of learners, of influencers, of mentors, and it just shows that actually, it's so small, the world, in so many ways. You think of it as massive, and how do you reach that many people? But I think it's, what we wanted at Supermoms with the launch of the book is just to sprinkle our magic and learning and expertise to a much wider audience. In a cost-effective way. Obviously, people take our courses, they love our courses, but it's a higher price point. And with the book, we're able to add value, help people accelerate their career at a reasonable price point. In the UK, it's $14.99. Obviously, in different countries, it's a slightly different currency and different rate. But we just really want to help as many people as possible. So it's fantastic, seeing that value. And every day, somebody is sharing a post or commenting on the book and what value they've got. We've had amazing reviews on Amazon, like over 30 reviews already. Last time I looked anyway. And so, it's fantastic to have such great feedback. So thank you. And for those that won the swag, I can see there they're waiting for their swag. That is definitely in order at the moment. I think we're waiting on one person at the moment for their t-shirt size. But yeah, just to create, I think I love the fact that I'm a bit of an entrepreneur, that we've got like a logo and a brand around it as well. So obviously we've got swag for that, and to get that out there. So I'm sure it'll be at a community conference near you soon. People wearing the t-shirts. I can't help myself but create another brand. But yeah, it's really exciting. So it's really great to kick off this series with you all, and to just look at, do a bit of a deep dive into a chapter each week. Really keen to get your questions to help answer anything that you might have got from the book, particularly those of you that are reflective learners. We have got a group on LinkedIn now around the book. So when people buy the book, there's a resources page with loads of free templates and different resources, and part of that is you can join the group, and that's a place where you can connect with me, ask questions. I'm a big one for asking questions of people, so I know what that's like. So I don't want you to ever sit there and think, oh gosh, well, what does she mean by that, or this or that scenario? And so please do ask questions in the group as well. And welcome to everybody listening today. It's great to see you all here from all over the world too.
Absolutely. And I love how you approached it from an A to Z perspective. I thought that was so interesting when you decided to do that. And now, having read the book, and I've taken the consultancy course as well, which is how I found Supermoms.
Yeah.
But it is, it's a lot, right? To imagine how to really elevate if you are a consultant already, to be just excellent, or make that pivot into being a consultant. And it can be a little bit overwhelming of where to start. And I love that A to Z. We're just going to take one bite at a time. And it's also a great way to integrate that learning and that specific thing into the day-to-day and practice that. So this will be a fun process to just take one core concept. But we are going to focus on Agile project methodology. And looking back, when I was introduced to Salesforce, it was in a sales leadership capacity. And we were a brand new customer and implementing. And one of the conversations I'm so embarrassed of having now was talking to our consultant and saying, listen, I don't want all these iterations. I'm going to have my team do it. I just want you to get it done. Just finish it and then we will use it. And now, knowing what I know today about Agile project methodology, that was the worst possible approach. So why don't you start with I can feel myself blushing thinking back of being in a room, a conference room with our leaders, just saying,
that wasn't your fault though, Shellen. They should have trained you on Agile project management.
Exactly. It was one of my missions of why I wanted to learn about Salesforce consulting, is I knew there had to be a better way. But why don't you start with just level setting with, tell us about what exactly is Agile project methodology and why is it really the gold standard for Salesforce projects?
Yeah, big question to start with, absolutely. So with Agile project management, it is the norm for tech projects, and it became the norm in the 90s and became a big trend globally as the better way of doing it. Now, I'm going to just bring this to life a little bit in terms of talking about some of the challenges, I suppose, of why, a new solution only comes about if there's pain points or problems. And so what you were finding is organizations would come to you, as a consultant and say, right, how much is it going to cost me to develop a Sales Cloud solution? And this is what I would be faced with every day running a nonprofit consultancy. And you're like, well, okay, I don't know how to quote for that without detailed requirements. Because if you think about it in Salesforce terms, how many objects, fields, reports, it's a infinite amount, and it's very hard to quote for that. So you're at that sort of position where it's saying, okay, well, I either need a detailed brief from you, where I can quote for everything in detail, and sort of understand it, or we can work in an Agile, what began then became the Agile approach. So with an Agile conversation in that situation, you would say, okay, well, we can definitely build Sales Cloud for you. What we can build at any level of detail is yet to be decided based on the design workshop and the design process. And then we can prioritize things and focus on those must-have requirements that are going to give you the minimum viable product, delivering quality, of course, and what they need from a business point of view. But it might mean that you don't get all of those requirements fulfilled. So that would be the way that you'd want to take a client with Agile project management, is sort of agreeing a budget and a timescale to work with without having a detailed set of requirements listed, which means you're not held to anything. Now, in some cases, a client would say to me, well, we want absolute assurance that we know what we're going to get for the money. If that was the case, you can still work in what we would call a waterfall project management approach, which is more the traditional approach before Agile came along. But the way that you would handle that project, and I have delivered Salesforce projects in this way, as many other people do, if a client is set on the traditional methodology, in that situation, I would say, okay, well, let's do the design workshops first, agree a budget for those, spec out all the detailed technical requirements, and then you can do a fixed price for the build, if you like. And that would then follow a waterfall terminology. So you're moving down a different road. You're not you're not quoting a whole price up front. But there comes risks with that. And this is where you need to educate the client and train them on why Agile is better. Whenever you go to a client, it is about educating them why, to get them bought in, to say Agile is the norm. The reason is it helps reduce risk for both us as a consultant and for you as a customer. Now, one of the reasons it reduces risk is that a Salesforce project could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, in terms of an implementation, for example. Technology changes every single day and new apps and products come out. Similarly, business requirements change every single day and things change. All of a sudden, you might need this rather than something else because you've won a new bid, or compliance or governance has changed. So you might need to change what you're doing. Now, with the traditional approach, like waterfall, for example, you might have agreed a set of requirements right at the outset, and then you would be fixed to having to deliver those over the 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, because that's what's been agreed. There's no flexibility in that. With Agile, you reduce that risk because what you're doing is identifying requirements and agreeing which of those requirements you're going to build on a weekly, fortnightly basis. And you keep iterating and prioritizing as you go through. So you're not ever subject to that problem of things not being held, sort of being in that situation where you've got to deliver on X, Y, Z. You can change and flex those business priorities as you need to. So it allows for much more flexibility in the project. It allows you to flex your requirements as and when you need. It allows you to evolve with new technology. So if new apps and products come in, you can stay with that latest functionality rather than being wedded to what would be in the traditional approach. And you've really got to educate the client on that as part of any buy-in and proposal stage so they understand it. And going back to your point, Shellen, when you started, what you would want to do is to train the client team, the user team, depending if you're an internal or external Salesforce professional, and train them on what Agile project management is. Get them to understand the why. Why is it here? What is its approach? What is its methodology before you deliver any design workshops to them? And so they understand it from the outset. So you would start with an educational process with the executive team who are paying for the project. And with Agile and the methodology that I'll talk about as part of this session, it's around the business goals and strategic priorities, which is important. So the senior management team have to be brought in. Then anybody as part of the design workshops need to be aware and educate on Agile project management. So certainly when I was trained in DSDM methodology, which is the one that I really advocate for anybody leading Salesforce projects, you would want to deliver a training session on that and train them on what it is as part of it. So it is the norm. It doesn't mean all projects are led that way. You can still be flexible and do some in a waterfall way, but you've just got to manage it in a certain approach and mitigate your risk where possible.
So how would someone go about educating themselves on this? I feel like people use Agile project methodology in conversation, or they describe what they're doing that way, but I don't think it is necessarily always the true methodology. So how would you recommend that somebody really learn how to do this effectively as it relates to Salesforce projects?
Yeah, so when I start with it, people bat around the term Agile project management. And when I delved into it for myself and learning how, what is Agile and what do I learn? I was like, oh, there's quite a lot of different methodologies. And then there's a very broad brush. People make up their own versions of it. And then there's hybrid versions. You're like, oh, okay, there's lots going on here. And I think in the Salesforce world, Scrum is a popular one. I think but Scrum comes below DSDM. And so when I did my research, that's why I was like, well, hang on a minute, Scrum isn't going to work for where I tend to sort of focus, which is leading a Salesforce project. DSDM methodology versus Scrum I think are the two that are most relevant to Salesforce projects. But there's Lean, and as I say, people make up their own versions. I think what's important is that you train, and I would say if you're going to manage Salesforce projects and be working with the executive sponsorship team on looking at the business priorities and prioritizing Salesforce projects that are aligned with business priorities, that's the DSDM methodology. If you are then, so I'll bring that to life a little bit. So say if I was working with a company and they were having a Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud implementation, you've got 3 projects there. With DSDM methodology, you'd be talking to them about their 3-year business strategy, where their key pain points are right now, what the biggest return investment needs to be, what's critical for them to stop the business sinking potentially, what we call must-have. We prioritize things with DSDM using Moscow rules. M is must-have, S is should have, C is could have, and W is won't have this time. It's the must-haves that are the critical ones that should always be delivered. But the test for that is that this must be delivered or else the business will falter or the project will falter. These are your 2 test points. So you would then go, okay, well, we have Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, or Marketing Cloud. Which of these three is the must-have right now? If all the business is going to falter, the should-have is that there's a workaround. And so that decides on whether you're going to go Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, or Marketing Cloud first, for example, which is the must-have that is critical. So say it was Sales Cloud because they need to make more sales to pay, fund the business. So if you then chose Sales Cloud, you'd then also then look at all the Sales Cloud requirements, and you would prioritize those based on the must-have, should-have rules. So we've got, for example, there's normally probably 100 requirements in Sales Cloud or more. But if you were to chunk those up into what we call high-level requirements in Sales Cloud, you might have a payment integration, you might have a WooCommerce or e-commerce integration, which could be the same thing or different, depending on, they might need both. You might have an e-signature solution, you might have an opportunity setup, there might be various high-level requirements within that, which have then a whole series of detailed requirements. But looking at those high-level requirements, you then prioritize those by must-have and should-have. Now, once you've got that set of high-level must-have requirements, say one was a payment integration, you then give that to your technical team to go, right, here's an implementation, payment integration that needs to happen in a sprint. That might take 2 weeks or a month, depending on how complicated it is and the level of functionality. That's where Scrum comes in. Scrum is that managing of a technical solution where you have daily stand-ups, you've got a technical team being huddled, you're going back and forth with the client about, okay, what are those requirements, sense check it, build it, and you're building it out. So Scrum sits underneath that top level. And Scrum does not prioritize things by time and budget. So it's not holding a project in time and budget, which is really what project management is all about. It's sort of about, people talk about user stories and the points and everything else, and that's fine in the technical sphere down here. But when you're looking at the business priorities and what functionality and what high level requirements, you're going to work on, that's where DSDM comes in. So if you're operating in that space as a Salesforce consultant or somebody that's got to look at multiple requirements and align them with business, that's where DSDM comes in. So I hope that brings it to life a little bit.
Appreciate that so much. And I know for many people that must have, should have conversation can get very complicated as you have various influencers of projects. How do you manage that part of getting to those clear must haves and should haves?
Brilliant question. I think one of the things that you've got to be conscious of, and going back to training, how do you train, Shellen? I think being trained in a methodology so you are confident in it and can feel the authoritiveness of delivering it and holding accountability with it is so important. So I trained in DSDM methodology, which allowed me to then feel that sense of confidence, professionalism, and approach in delivering it in the workplace and explaining it to people and training them in it, and then operating a whole project around it. And that's what we train. We train people in DSDM, Agile Project Management, on our consultancy skills course. And what is important about that, as I say, is you feel that level of authority. Now, not everybody is going to be a great project manager in that they might have that lovely attribute. I'll say that because it's not a bad attribute at all, and it's not something to beat yourself up about. But you might have that attribute in yourself that doesn't like to say no to people, and there's always a yes person. And it might be that you aren't the project manager. It's great to know about these disciplines and everything else, and to have this training gives you that confidence and authoritiveness to do it. And if it does give you that confidence, that's great, because you have to be in that room. And when a client, and they will try to, quite often this can happen, is, they might, obviously, they want everything in their budget. They've got pressure, right, to deliver. And if you have trained them in Agile DSDM methodology, they should be honoring it and working with you, right? That's a brilliant relationship that you want to have. So you shouldn't feel awkward by saying, there's too many requirements here to meet the budget. And that's the relationship you want. So if I had delivered, and this would happen with my clients, I deliver a workshop. We gather a load of requirements through that design workshop. We have prioritized them throughout. But then when we've gone through the priorities, and they've been documented and been estimated, the must-haves are still coming out as too much over budget. So what would naturally happen, and what should rightly happen, is you'd push that back to a client, and you say to them, look, we've still got too many must-haves in here, we need to reprioritize them. The client would happily then reprioritize, knowing the methodology, knowing the approach and everything else. You've got to feel really comfortable doing that. And some people who are a yes person feel naturally uncomfortable doing it. That's nothing wrong with that. But in the Agile space, you've got to feel comfortable with saying, there's still too many here, we need to, reduce them. And the client who understands and is aligned with Agile project management methodology, because they respect it, they've been trained in it and everything else, will work with you on that and understand it. And that's your perfect place. Obviously, you might have situations where a client then isn't aligning with Agile project management, maybe because there's pressure on them and everything else, in which case you then have to step back, and obviously there's a cause for concern there, and you need to realign on the approach and methodology, and then you have to go, well, what's going on here? And I have had a couple of challenging situations where that has sometimes been the case. And so then you need to flag that and pause on the project until an alignment on that methodology has been seen. The other is to sense check yourself about whether you feel comfortable going back to the client and saying, look, you can't have all of these things. And say, if you're following an Agile methodology and you feel trained in it and you feel confident in it, you feel you should be in a good place to hold that relationship without you feeling any sense of guilt around it, because it's the norm, it's it's the process. But if you still continue to feel that level of, oh, I'm uncomfortable in this role, we're very lucky in the Salesforce ecosystem that we don't have to wear all the hats if we don't want to. There are consultancies where you can play the VA in the technical part and not the project management part, or you can wear all the hats if you want to. So I think it's just being aware that, training it, understand it, delivering it if you feel comfortable delivering in it, don't deliver it if you don't feel comfortable delivering it, but at least know and understand it, because on any Salesforce project, it's going to be a dimension of the project, whether it's you doing it or somebody else. So obviously, having that awareness is really important.
So if you were hiring for a consultant on your team, looking back as you were interviewing people, how do you identify somebody who may be well suited for that type of work? And then I guess related to that, how can someone sort of evaluate that in themselves? If I can imagine you're going to be uncomfortable with anything new, you got to work through that. But how do you identify if that's like a good potential role for you? And then as somebody hiring either a consultant or you were hiring consultants to be on your team, how did you evaluate whether or not this was going to be work that someone was well suited for?
I think it's important to look at various traits, I suppose. Are you comfortable holding people to account, and being able to, have that conversation where you can, not be that yes person, where you can sort of push back, manage things. I think project management traits are about, how do you manage your time effectively? How do you manage budgets effectively? At Supermums, we very much work with women returners as well, people who've not necessarily had, recent work experience in some cases because they've had time out of work. But if they are the project manager at home, and are great with spreadsheets and budgeting and time allocation, have run volunteer events, all those are the traits that we would, so an employer would look at and see, okay, yeah, they're very super organized in everything. But also, say, holding account of the family. I mean, negotiations with families can be just as tough as negotiations in the workplace sometimes. It's like a constant, negotiation on some aspects, but all of those things are very relevant skills, and whether that's in the workplace or at home, if you can demonstrate those things, that's fantastic. I think also training people in a certain methodology and getting people bought into it, you are selling Agile project management into a team and an organization who may never have heard about it before. So what is the best approach to do that, and getting them on board with it so they trust it and own it and engage with it? That's what success looks like. So if you've sold concepts or sold models in before, they're all great traits to have as well. And I think equally, though, is don't be scared of it. Try it. I think in the Salesforce world, I have worn most of the different hats apart from developer hat. Right, I can't get my head around code. I tried. I say never. Maybe it's my learning style. I won't be defeated yet. But I have done all the different roles, and also equally, I'll say, I prefer this, I prefer that. Try it. Try Agile project management. If you feel that it's not for you, once you've tried it and you've experienced it, step out of it. We have such a privilege in the Salesforce world where we can go into different roles and transverse. And I think it's excellent to try different roles out, or have a blend of roles, and then get more specific about what you need. And so that's why with our consultancy skills course, I cover business analysis, change management, and agile project management, as well as a whole raft of things around that. And we made it really cost effective, because when I trained in those different disciplines myself, all across all of them, I'd spent £11,000. And if you decide that one of those isn't for you or not, that's quite a cost to entail. Whereas with our course, you would get training, but also you're getting a taste of everything, enough to allow you to apply it, enough for a company to see that you're trained in delivering that, before potentially investing more in deeper level of study or certifications. You don't necessarily need a whole raft of these different certifications, and to spend that level of investment if it's not going to be necessarily part of your day-to-day job, or you need those certs. Salesforce certifications, yes. The other certifications, the experience and the methodologies are a really important thing, and how you've been trained. But I think it's important for people. Agile project management does not work in isolation. You have to do the hat trick, and that's why I love the ABC of the start of the book, the A to Z, so much. It's like, it's just made perfectly for this. This is surely why the alphabet was created. But you've got agile project management, business analysis, and change management are interdisciplinary skills that you cannot do in isolation. They all have to be delivered on a Salesforce project. They all overlap. They all integrate. And so I invite you all to join us, clearly, for the next LinkedIn Live next week, where we're going to do a deep dive into business analysis. And then obviously the week later, we'll do change management. So I invite you to bring any other questions that you've got to the group, because I know we're running out of time on this live. But I hope that's just been really good insight for everybody into why Agile is so important, I guess.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And there were a couple of questions. We will answer those in the group. I'll add the link after, so that you all can join. And please do. We're very excited to have your questions and engagement. If you have a situation you want to bring in there to discuss, we can do that as well. So Heather, thank you for taking time out of your Marrakesh adventure today for this LinkedIn Live. It truly is a global experience, and we will invite everyone to join us next week as we dive into B of the A to Z and tap into business analysis.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shellen. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and for joining us. We'll see you all very soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.